Welcome to another GNU program. With us, we have Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Second Vice President, the Honorable Greenidge. In this instance, we'll be speaking on Guyana's engagements with international bodies. Minister, thank you for your time.
It's my pleasure, Mr. Greenidge.
Guyana would have recently participated in the recently concluded 8th ACP Heads Summit. What is the update coming out of that summit, sir?
Well, as you are aware, the ACP Heads of Government Summit has been a long-awaited one, and it was held successfully in Papua New Guinea, and it was reasonably well attended. I say reasonably because since the meeting was held in the Pacific, many of the ACP member states have or would have had considerably long journeys. I think the journey from Georgetown to Port Moresby was somewhere in the region of 30 hours of flying alone, and that is 30 hours each way, which is more than the amount of time spent in the meeting itself. So quite a lot of heads resile from such a long journey, because you're looking at effectively 4 days away for a 2-day meeting, or perhaps 5 days away for a 2-day meeting. But it was reasonably well attended. You had the Pacific heads, many of the Pacific heads, as you would expect, it's in the region. The CARICOM member states were represented at the level of heads of government mostly, but and ministers of foreign affairs mostly, but also some heads of government, prime ministers, for example, and deputy prime ministers. And in relation to Africa, you had a considerable number of prime ministers. So you had Prime Minister of Senegal, Deputy Prime Minister of St. Vincent. You had the President Mugabe of Zimbabwe, the Prime Minister of Senegal, and the like. So it was, I can't give you the number of attendants, but I think most delegations were there. Now, the meeting, the highlight of the meeting for many people was the discussion on the future of the ACP. The meeting was chaired by the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, that discussion, and Chief Obasanjo introduced the report from the Eminent Persons Committee. That Eminent Persons Committee included, in addition to former President Obasanjo, former President Jagdeo, and others, including one of my former managers at the ACP Secretariat. And the presentation was one that I think the members found both interesting and I think acceptable in general terms. So the meeting heard from President Obasanjo a recommendation arising from his consultations that the ACP group continues. That is, that the group agreed that they will continue to struggle to work with the EU for issues surrounding development, the enhancement of development, the reduction of poverty. As you know, the ACP group at this point in time focuses its work largely upon what is called development cooperation finance, trade matters, trade and trade cooperation, and cultural cooperation in other areas. But over the years, the work of the group has spread very widely. There are lots of political things have become included. And the discussion on that first topic, when the report had been made, was that the group should continue to work together as the ACP. They should try to build other partnerships, not only ACP EU, but ACP other partners, and that in the course of looking at their work, they would try and narrow the focus of the group to a core set of issues, turning upon trade, technology and technology-related issues, dialogue, particularly on the political dimension, and that they would focus attention on identifying financing mechanisms, including possibly a trust fund for the work of the group, so that they wouldn't have had to depend so heavily upon the EU in future. In looking at the working of the group, the Eminent Persons Group also identified the need to restructure the Secretariat and the institutions of the ACP. In that regard, as you know, the ACP group is governed at the pinnacle by the ACP heads of government and heads of state, and under that is a committee of ambassadors, and below the committee of ambassadors you have a set of technical bodies. It was agreed that that structure needed to be revisited, and in particular there was an idea that they add a conference of foreign ministers. Also floated was the possibility of ministers of finance and central banks meeting with a view to feeding the process that I just described. And the group was sympathetic to that proposal. The question of trust fund, I think, met with a consensus, but people wanted to look at the details to know exactly what that involved. But if I might just finish the structure, there was also the idea that in addition to a conference of foreign ministers and possibly a scheduled set of meetings with the Minister of Finance, that you have a technical advisory body which would seek to reinforce and strengthen the work of the Secretariat and to give guidance as regards best practice to the Secretary General. And those were accepted. I think there was also a concern that the Secretariat itself, as currently working, and the Committee of Ambassadors, which has a day-to-day function as regards the Secretariat, that those functions perhaps need to be curtailed because they were probably too restrictive. And for that reason, there was, if you like, scope for further refining and elaboration of the restructuring proposal. So there was a suggestion that the work of the Committee of Ambassadors and the committee's interface with the Secretariat needs to be revisited. In my own intervention, I pointed out that enough was not said about the role of the Committee of Ambassadors and its sometimes dysfunctional involvement in the work of the Secretariat, and therefore it was agreed that they would be looked at. The African group had expressed concern that most of them had not had time to look at the report, and that it might be useful for President Obasanjo to visit them when they have, or to be present when they have the discussions at a regional level. And I believe that they accepted that, and I had also requested that consideration be given to Obasanjo's presence at the CARICOM Heads Summit, which is to take place at the beginning of July, and that was accepted. It is, of course, for the CARICOM heads to take that decision, but I was simply opening the door in the event that the heads felt that they needed additional support, advice, and assistance, and that was accepted. The countries discussed a number of issues in addition to the future of the ACP itself. There was a report from the Council of Ministers, and in that report from the Council of Ministers, you had many countries raising concerns about climate change. I would say that a considerable portion of the deliberations focused upon global warming and climate change, their implications, and what could be done to ameliorate the impact of those forces on the well-being of the people in the regions. So time was spent on that, and a lot of countries, of course, had strong positions on this. So that was the other matter. They didn't spend very much time on the implementation of the EPA and the progress in the various regions, because that had already been reported at the level of the Council of Ministers. So those really the main issues coming out of the summit.
That's very good. At least we would now see from the ACP being better positioned, because if we're going to be looking at the structure, it means that indeed we will have a better level of coordination for at least the future role that the ACP intends to play. I remember we said that we will be canvassing for CARICOM to have a greater participation in ACP in terms of the role of CARICOM as it pertains to the future of the ACP. I know you just made mention that at least the president should be here for the CARICOM Heads Summit. How else has that gone?
No.
Well, he should be here. The door was opened for that to happen,
President
but
yes.
the CARICOM heads still have to accept that.
Yes, and of course it couldn't be, or it probably will not be. Although I did say that, it probably may not be this session. It could. The heads may decide to have him at the intersessional, but it is for them to arrange and to decide on the manner and timing of the discourse.
The lobbying for CARICOM's role in the ACP, how was that? How did that work?
Well, CARICOM's role in the ACP is for CARICOM to decide. By and large, the partners in the Lome and Cotonou group, I think, are expecting stronger signals from the CARICOM as to what its intentions are. And it remains for CARICOM to state clearly to the Commission and to these partners that they want a central role in the group.
Wow, that's good. Apart from the ACP Heads Summit, the Heads of Government Summit, we understand that there is a Parliamentary Assembly that should be on its way. This is not just the ACP Parliamentary Summit, but the ACP EU Joint Parliamentary, so you have both assemblies meeting shortly. Where are we with that, sir?
Well, the work of the ACP group is carried not only by the official representatives of the states, but it is also carried by what you may call the parliamentary assemblies. The Parliamentary Assembly is an assembly of parliamentarians at the ACP level. It takes place at the ACP level, it takes place as an all ACP meeting in which parliamentarians come. Some countries have representatives from both the governing and from opposition joint parliamentarians. And at the Joint Parliamentary Assembly, the idea is that ACP parliamentarians meet with EU parliamentarians. They debate or they decide on issues. A number of political issues were on their agenda the last time, and many of these had to do with the crisis that was taking place in Africa. And the attempt by the group to influence those developments. Burundi was the subject of attention, and the Maldives was also the subject of attention by the Joint Parliamentary Assembly. Whether these countries were behaving in a manner inconsistent with the broader principles of Cotonou.
Do we have a representative, and how important is that for Guyana?
The representative that you have in the Joint Parliamentary Assembly is chosen from the Parliament, and I'm of course a parliamentarian. I've attended that assembly. I believe that Ms. Dawn Hastings has been identified, and I'm not sure offhand who else from Guyana participates in the parliamentary assemblies, but they are at liberty to raise issues and contribute to the debates on matters constraining the regional groupings.
How important is that for us, the parliamentary session?
The Parliamentary Assembly is very important because in the EU context, the parliamentarians act as a sort of expediters. They've assisted us in the past by being very, how should I put, pro-people. And it is a group that I think we can work closely with.
In the past, this is just looking back a bit, how have we benefited, at least two areas where we would have benefited tangibly from them expediting certain matters in our favor?
Tangibly, you mean the ACP, you mean the Joint Parliamentary Assembly or ACP? Well, the Joint Parliamentary Assembly has in the past been concerned to ensure that the political dimensions are pursued, so matters to do with elections and expediting elections are matters that they have been strong on.
What about the ACP Parliamentary Assembly?
The ACP Parliamentary Assembly is the same thing. The ACP is an all ACP one, and they discuss all sorts of matters. In there, they also raise for the attention of the politicians on both sides issues that they think need attention. They also will send observers.
Understand. So I do appreciate that within this contract that we have in terms of within the body, the ACP body, Guyana is indeed, so it seems, playing their part, playing an active role in terms of fashioning, guiding at least the future development of the grouping.
Yes, well, we try. Since the meetings have been running since last year. You've had the session, the normal session. You had the normal session last year, and you will have a normal one this year. And insofar as we participated in this meeting, we've made full use of it. And you will be aware, for example, that we did present an update on the Guyana-Venezuela border situation. We presented a resolution which was adopted by the ministers, the council. First of all, at the level of the ACP Parliamentary Assembly, a resolution was proposed. It will eventually get to the Joint Parliamentary Assembly, and at the level of the Council of Ministers, we did make a proposal, and would expect that that proposal will be considered. Sorry, we did make a proposal, and as you would expect, that proposal was considered, and it has been accepted by way of a declaration. There has been a declaration which expressed concern about the actions on the border that could not be considered peaceful, and calling upon both parties to remember their obligations under the 1966 Geneva Agreement and under the 1899 Arbitral Award, and also calling upon the parties to respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as calling upon the parties to adhere to international law. And for us, that was good. That's important.
Thank you, sir. Now, that is ACP, but we also have engagements with the ACS, the Association of Caribbean States, and recently we had a head summit in Havana, Cuba. How did things progress in that summit?
Well, the head summit in Havana took place from Thursday last until Saturday, and the discussion spanned a range of issues. I suppose, in a sense, reflecting general global concerns about climate change. That was one of the focuses. They discussed extensively the COP21 outcome and tried to see how they could take it forward. At the same time, the ACS also looked at countries that had encountered difficulties. So they raised at the level of ACS the difficulties faced by ACP countries as respect climate change and global warming. And this, of course, is of special interest to the countries in the Pacific, where global warming, fishing without regard to the rules as nets and forms of capture, all of these were raised. They were discussed quite extensively. And I think they have an idea of how to go forward on these.
How does Guyana stand to benefit?
Well, Guyana will benefit insofar as these are proposals that will enhance our understanding and our cooperation in relation to global warming. So that is
where ACS is concerned. What else? The ACS, how else do we benefit from being a part of this group?
Well, the group discusses regional issues. A lot of time was spent on discussion on Venezuela and the threats that Venezuela's apparent disintegration will have for members in the region, members for the group. So that was discussed quite extensively, and suggestions were made, which if they work, would of course benefit for Guyana. The plenary of the ACS did discuss a number of things. There were new members, Martinique and Saint Martin, and also Guadeloupe were the subjects of discussion, with a view to having them as associate members, and they were welcomed. They were invited also to comment on bring a message to the group. At the same time, there was a controversy over the position of Venezuela, and the group discussed that. In the end, the group was, notwithstanding some polarization, differences of view as to how best to lend support to the people of Venezuela in the light of the difficulties they're facing on the economic side and so forth. The meeting agreed to embrace, for the most part, the terminology and terms of the OAS, declaration, which came out a couple of weeks ago. That was adopted in large part by the ACS meeting, and I think one would hope that the positions taken by the heads, namely to encourage dialogue between government and other civil partners, could form if you like, the backbone of future action by Venezuela and by Venezuelan government and the non-state actors and opposition party members within Venezuela itself.
Thank you, sir. How disposed would Guyana be to lending any level of support to Venezuela given their current economic situation?
Well, I don't think Guyana is in a position to do much for Venezuela at the level of a government. The Venezuelan government may in any case not be interested, as you would have seen from the debate itself. A number of factors have to be taken into account. The Venezuelan government doesn't acknowledge that they have any problems, or any problems that are not entirely externally generated and that can't be removed. But In Guyana, I think there's an inclination to provide material assistance and material assistance from citizens to citizens. In other words, from private citizens in Guyana to those in Venezuela. And I think we can go forward with those. There have been some discussion internally here along those lines.
Understood, sir. Thank you. There is the Organization of American States, OAS General Assembly, that is upcoming, and more than likely Guyana will have a participation there. Can you please update me on Guyana's position going into that assembly?
A lot of the political issues in the area at the moment are similar. They're the same. You're speaking about political dialogue to resolve conflicts. You're speaking also about concerns in relation to climate change and so forth. So those are the topical issues. Also, there are development issues as such. How best might we go forward in trying to encourage private investment, private sector initiatives?
I understand. Minister, is there any, well, we would have touched on the ACS, the ACP, but recently we would have seen fresh moves by Venezuela to where they opened fire on our officers. What is the position with that? Where are we? I mean, clearly they would have breached international law.
Well, we have sought an explanation from Venezuela as to why it is that they would have opened fire on officials traveling in a clearly marked boat on a section of the river which belongs to Guyana. And we have not gotten a satisfactory response to this.
I don't expect for you to essay a way forward or a move that Guyana intends to take, but what is the wisdom in going forward in dealing with this particular issue within the framework of past aggressions seen by Venezuela?
Guyana's intention here is to raise awareness of actions and activities that pose a threat to peace and stability. Also to perhaps draw to the attention of members of the region challenges of various types, whether they're accidental or deliberate, and to enable them to exchange ideas on how to meet those challenges and how to overcome some of the difficulties. And that is what we get out of this out of these types of meetings. A number of issues pertaining to borders have been raised. Belize has a major problem with Guatemala, and the restrictions by Guatemalan placed on legitimate activities of Belizeans, and those would have been well aired, and there was a request by Belize for members of the region to try and impress upon Guatemala the need to live within the legal framework.
Thank you for watching. You would have heard from the Honorable Carl Greenidge, Minister of Foreign Affairs, of Guyana's engagement with international bodies. Thank you for watching.